Good day, everybody. Welcome to the Deal Scout. On today's show, we're going to have a conversation with a broker, a business broker, who has broke company records selling over 326, and as of tomorrow, will be 327 businesses in his career. Michael, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Josh. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So, kind of give us an idea. You and I are having a cup of coffee. We're hanging out in, South Florida somewhere, and we're having a cup of coffee. And, someone walks up and I go, "Hey, I want you to meet my buddy Mike." And they go, "Hey, Mike, who are you? What do you do?" How do you typically respond?
I'm Mike Shea. I'm a dad, and I sell businesses. It doesn't get any more complicated than that.
Yeah, that's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. So kind of give us an idea. Your dad, you don't have to tell us of how you became a father. We don't need to go over that on this show, but how'd you, give us your background. How'd you go from, serving in the U.S. Army, which thank you for your service. Salute to all frontline workers, military, police, fire. We love you guys. So how'd you go from that to selling businesses?
Yeah. A convoluted journey. So I grew up in New Jersey, the son of a doctor. Went to private school, went to Catholic college. On a whim, when I was in college, always knew I was going to be join the military. So I was in ROTC at school and enlisted my sophomore year to get some time being beat up and yelled at as a private. Told my mother I wanted to experience misery so I could, better understand kind of an egalitarian approach to leadership. Got commissioned onto active duty. Did not get branched as what I wanted to be. So in the Army, you have, specialties within the Army. I gave them my wish list of 10 things and found out very quickly the Army has different plans, and they made me a specialty. I'm not I had no background in, so I was a chemical weapons officer, which pretty much said, hey, you're going to do your short period of time. You'll never make general because you're not smart enough. It was a time in the country when Bush Sr. was leaving and Clinton was coming in, and I kind of looked ahead and said, this isn't going to end well. I don't want to be 40 years old. So, there's a little cottage industry of corporate recruiters that recruit military officers to go work in companies, pharmaceutical, consumer packages. So I ended up doing logistics work, then bouncing over to Pepsi, getting recruited by military officer to military officer, some bounces around doing logistics, and then got into sales and consumer packages, selling water and soda pop, and landed here in Florida. We were started to have children and decided that, this corporate move thing was not conducive to a healthy lifestyle. And I came to Transworld, much like Andy Cagnetta did, looking to possibly buy a business. Became an agent, thinking I can find one. And 16 plus years later, I'm still here. So that's how that happened.
So you mentioned you were slinging, bottled water and soda pop. So you must be from up north somewhere if it's soda pop.
Yeah, it was soda pop and specifically Pepsi. So I still, when I walk through a grocery store, will, move some Coke bottles over to get better shelf position. I front bottles, and I don't drink Coke. Just don't, the brand loyalty is the force is strong with this one. So
there you go. So, all right. So you started out as a potential buyer, right? You're like, corporate life, man, we're moving around a lot. I'm starting to have kids, let's explore buying a business. You became an agent, and then you've been, essentially brokering businesses, buying and selling businesses for the last 15 years, over 300 of them.
Yeah.
How'd you get started in the world of business brokering, right? It's a job that you get what you bring in, right?
Yeah.
If you don't bring in something, you don't get.
Yeah.
How'd you get started? Like, what was your first couple deals? Walk us through that.
So December 2005 is when I became an agent. My realtor's husband brought me into the business. He's since passed on, but, and I went to meet one of the partners, who's still a partner, who was running the Orlando office. And this guy's super smart, Penn grad, New Jersey guy, Italian, Cagnetta has an affinity for Italians. Yeah. And he set me up with some training, and I just went out there. What I did was I looked around what everybody else was doing. Now, going from salary to hunt and kill is pretty rough. So, and where I was at Pepsi and Nestle, there's segments and there's channels. So when I manage sales teams in there, you're taught that different channels have different values. So I approached it probably not with great intent, but I need to make cash flow. Just like any other business owner, I needed to build cash flow. And I watched what was working and what was being done and what was, frankly, what had the least amount of likelihood of getting killed in the deal process. And I remember going to training, and our trainer down in Fort Lauderdale said 2 things kill deals: lawyers and landlords. So I oriented around anything that had a least likeliness of having a lawyer or a landlord engage. And I became like the lawn guy. Back in 2005, 2006, I started selling lawn companies. They're not sexy, but they're simple. And the dynamics of them are pretty healthy in terms of cash flow. And I started to crank out lawn and landscaping companies. Literally became the guy, and then everyone else in the city started referring them over to me. And that kind of compounded, and then some things started to happen. We're like, hey, every 3 years a guy would go, I hate this job, and flip it back to me, and I'd sell it again and sell it again and sell it again. And that kind of created this compound. And then 2007, 2008 hits, which was, the bubble. So,
So, all right. I love this, because you found a niche within an industry that a lot of people are probably chasing, the whales. They want to be an M&A, or they want to do the $100 million tech company, and they're swinging for these major exits. You picked a lane focusing on deal flow, because babies need diapers, right, and formula.
That was paramount. I had just had my second, and I can remember thinking, I just need to make this amount of money a year, and I'm going to be happy. And there wasn't a plan on that cascading. So when I talk to new agents in our firm, I kind of say, hey, singles and doubles, singles and doubles. And one of the nuances of brokerage is that most business brokers don't stick around very long. I think the average lifestyle or lifespan is 3 years. So oddly enough, deals start to compound and return every 3 to 5. So I don't think we really had a matrix. I mean, we saw deals, internally when we report that deals were flipping, and we touch a deal once or twice, but not a lot of brokers stick around. So you're touching stuff 7, 8, 9 times. So the annuity kind of came to its own creation, coupled with the recession, where buyers couldn't get financing. I was like the lone man standing, because a lot of people were doing bigger deals. The banks dried up. They had ignored that Main Street segment of the marketplace, and I was still standing. So I was still doing 20 deals a year through the recession. It wasn't any great genius on my part. It was just dumb luck, but driven by the need to put diapers on babies and feed my family.
Yeah. So you mentioned the lifespan of a broker is about 3 years. Are they passing away, or are they going to another business, a career?
No, I think, this is usually a career for second careerists. If you were to, Andy's going to kill me, but when you go to an IBBA conference, it's predominantly white male, gray hair. I mean, it's changing because the demographics of the United States are changing, but it's usually a business where, if you think about it, it takes 6 months to get your first deal. Yeah. That's a long time to go on. Statistically, it can be longer or shorter, but on average it takes 6 months to close. So you got to have some healthy reserves to go that distance. So without another source of income or a retirement package, it's hard to kind of, get to that point, that tipping point. And then, Transworld's nuance of size allows us to kind of carry the inventory to accelerate the deal flow a little bit, but most brokerages are boutique. So they pivot up to the whale, and like Ahab, it usually doesn't end well,
A lot of people don't know what to even do when they catch a whale. So they, I want to go whale hunting. I want to do M&A or SPACs or, all this stuff. And then they're like, they catch the whale and they can't afford to skin the whale.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, closing a whale takes time and resources. So you have to kind of have, it goes back to that mixed question. So, I always, as a consumer product sales guy, I'd be like, look, the C-store selling a single pack of 20-ounce Pepsi, right, is as important from a gross margin standpoint to feed the beast, to sell a tractor trailer load, to Publix grocery. One can't be done without the other. And when you look at how brokerages practice and analyze the cash flow in turn, which is what buyers and sellers don't really watch. It's like when they think a buyer, they focus on price, or a broker, they focus on price, and they think everything's equal. But y'all need to drill down and look at the balance sheets of your brokerage, see if they can go the distance. Because that broker, more often than not, needs to deal more than you do. Because if they can't say no, they're not really brokering. They're pimping.
They're hustling, right? So
they're pimping.
This is a great point, right? If they need that deal to happen, because brokers get paid when the deal is done, right? And money is transferred.
Unless they're conning you out of money on the front end, because that really tells you they have no cash flow.
Ooh, interesting. We'll hit that in a second. So people they get to this point where they have to do the deal. Now, at that point, do they have the best fiduciary obligatory, responsibilities to the seller if they are trying to get a deal done because they need to eat? At that point, is the customer in their best interest or the deal? What are your thoughts?
Well, there's a legal question there in terms of the status of the broker. And then there's an ethical question. I remember one of my corporate gigs, when I go quote, one of the requirements was we had to produce financials. There was a period where I did some logistics work for some big banks, and they wanted to see the health of the firm. Yeah. So we would submit our financials. And, the reason for that is to make sure you're healthy, right? That you're not going to be morally compromised or ethically compromised when you make a deal. I'm pretty blunt with regard to, hey, I don't need the deal. It's not going to change my lifestyle one way or another because I'm doing 30 anyways. Whether that one deal for $2-3 million doesn't change my life one bit, because I'm going to do another 25 anyways. The other guy can't. He can't say that. Yeah. He can't. The data doesn't lie. Now, the hard thing has been how does that get illustrated to sellers when they're making choices? It's incumbent upon the seller to ask that question, to kind of go, where's the funding coming to run the distance and to do the advertising, and do they have that balance sheet to fight the fight? In the military, we used to think that way. It's like, okay, what's our reserves? Do we have the reserves to go the distance? So part of that old military, nut roll goes through my head about being able to go the distance on a deal, because those larger deals take longer time. They can go 6 to 12 months. Not that the little ones can't, but you got to have that cash flow to sustain yourself. And if you're only doing 2 transactions a year, and half that's going to feed your family, what's your ability to pivot? And and then you get into the dynamics of why do deals die, and how often do deals die, and what does that do to the cash flow of an organization? At a boutique brokerage level, it can be monumentally hard to go the distance. So to the question, I don't know. I mean, I always tell people, interview a bunch of brokers, see how they treat their dog, take them to lunch, see how they treat the waiter, and see if you like the guy. But more importantly, do you trust their character? Because they're going to be intimate with your deal, and you got to be, when it gets tough, you got to trust their judgment call. So.
Yeah. Now you mentioned, and this might be controversial, but I love it. Right? You mentioned, unless someone's conning you out on the front end of a buy side agreement or something like that. Take us there, man. Unpack that a little bit for us, because I said, brokers only make money when the deal's done. You said unless they get you on the front end. What's that look like?
Yeah. So our industry is going through a real sea change. Back in the day, before the internet came to place and there was a real marketplace, people would say, hey, I'm expending money. You'd see them in the suit, and then they produce decks, these massive decks that I always giggle at them, because they're, the first 50 pages are just nonsense that they downloaded off Wikipedia, and then there's a bunch of disclaimers, and then the valuation tends to be exponentially higher than it really is because they're using one, there's a lot of different ways to value businesses. And, you pay money for this product that isn't worth the paper it's written on. And, you ever see Tommy Boy?
Yeah.
Right? The guaranteed on the box, right? I always give that analogy. It's like, you love to have this piece of paper you can rub and touch and feel good, but it doesn't mean a hill of spit. It really doesn't. When I give you the same valuation in about 5 minutes, it's almost like the Wizard of Oz thing where, you go behind the curtain and you pull the levers to make people see. And I'm like, do you want me to go through the kabuki dance to tell you what the number is? Or do you want me to just show you how it's done? And more often than not, the sellers will go, just show me. And they appreciate it. And I'll go, well, look, here's how you read a tax return. Here's how it's done. Here's what the cash flow is. This is why we don't add back, all your inventory, or why it's included. And, this is why the private equity group looks at it this way. And now the challenge for me or for Transworld guys is in that we go out with that approach to kind of blunt and upfront, and we're competing against someone who's told the seller what they want to hear.
Yeah.
It's like proving a negative, right? How you do it, right? That's where the character and the track record kind of comes to bear.
And you could tell a good steak by shoving your head up the bull's ass, or you could take the butcher's word for it.
I couldn't come up with the quote. I couldn't remember the quote, but yeah, exactly.
Tommy Boy, what a great sales movie.
That hangs in my office at downtown here, so that's above my desk.
Yeah, what a great quote. So I like the blunt approach. I like honest, right? I like transparent and, kind of diving into the details and sharing. But not everybody like that, right? So you're competing against people who are tickling their ears, right? So how do people typically come to you to, what kind of businesses are you focused on now? What industries, what demographic, like areas or geographic, I should say, like what are you focusing on now? You've done a lot of deals.
Yeah. So it's changed. It's changed as I was, building my practice. Primary need was to feed the family. Right. And I think I had a healthy dose of humility in knowing what I didn't know. Right. And I'm okay with taking 30 deals of stuff that nobody wants to touch because they think it's a dirty business. I'm okay with selling pool companies and property management companies and, sheet metal businesses. And, I can't tell you how many times I've done deals where they called somebody else and the other guy wouldn't touch it because it was too far or too small. I mean, I love it. I love it. So I have no minimum. One is because I'm kind of greedy and I value every customer, and it's not up to me to decide who has value and who does not. Second, as I've gotten older and been around longer, the reputation builds. And so now I've done more deals this year north of $3 million than I've ever done in my life. Now, one of the differences with me was that I chose to bring in, I don't know if you've talked to Peter Berg.
Yeah.
So I make a conscious choice to bring Peter in, and you will find no two more different people
He's interesting.
than Peter and I. Philosophically, how we approach things is different. He's far more soft soap than I'm far more firm. But we make an interesting team. And we've done 4 deals this year together.
Yeah.
Where I leverage his skills and his resources in the M&A team with my kind of down home, on the ground, blocking and tackling type approach to marketing. And the greed component of it is I'm still going to control market share on the Main Street level because I value that. I value those customers. Now here, I give away half the commission, but you know what? The deal gets done.
Yeah. I don't mind giving away half of a $3 million deal rather than 100% of a no deal. Right.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I got a guy called me the other day. I've known him for 16 years. And the next day I already said, hey, Pete, let's do it together. The next day, someone called me from a dead listing, said, hey, do you have one in this industry? And I went, yeah, but it's not up live. And we got an offer on it yesterday, full price. Pete didn't do anything. Now I'll need Pete later because, and this is one of the things that goes to the character question is when you're doing those transactions and servicing customers, time is a factor, and your ability to touch customers and to manage deals to close. Deals fall apart a lot after contract because of speed, mistakes, lack of attention to detail. On those bigger transactions, I bring in him and his admin, Cynthia, to assist because, I can't always be there. I've got 3 kids. I care for my mother who's in her 80s, and my wife's a busy executive. So to have a balanced approach to running my business and my life, I got to lean on other people. And, he's my partner. So, it makes sense. It's not about money, although, in the long run, we all win. It's probably why I can last as long as I can.
Yeah.
It's 16 years is a long time. I only look like I'm 40, right?
No, no, I'm just kidding. Listen, I turned 40. I'll turn 40 next Sunday or something, or Monday. So I'm almost there. How old are you?
52.
52. Okay. So we're close enough to be like cousins or brothers or something like that.
Yeah.
So as someone comes up to you and they go, "Hey, this happened the other day. I've got a pool business. Walk us through," because you go, "Cool. Hey, here's the number. Here's how you value your business." Kind of walk us through that exercise. Someone comes to you and they say, "Hey, I have a landscaping business or a pool company." Kind of walk us through how you approach valuation.
So there are KPIs for every industry. There are things that, pool and lawn, property management, those tend to be things that I can ask you a dozen questions and I'm going to pretty much know where it's at.
Yeah.
So I'll say, pool guy comes up to me and I'll say, "How many routes you got?" Say he's got 2. "How many stops a day you're doing?" He's going to answer that question. Okay. Are the pools covered or not covered? Meaning, do they have a lanai or not a lanai? You're going to go, "Well, why the hell is he asking that question?" Leaves and chlorine costs. So I'll back into that, right? So then I'll ask what neighborhoods or what part of town are they on? And that question correlates to how many stops, because if you're all over the city, you're going to do less stops a day, which means your fuel costs are going to go up. This is before I've ever looked at a financial.
Yeah.
The covered uncovered thing is more about chlorine consumption and time on the property, because your costs in that business are chlorine, chemicals, and labor. If it's not enclosed, there's going to be leaves, which means more time, which means more, and the pool heats up higher when there's no screen on it, which means the chemicals get dissipated. So it means your margins suck at that point, right? So unless your price per pool is higher, right? So all I'm doing is kind of zeroing in on the target. So when they hand me the financials, it either smells right or it doesn't smell right. Right? It's kind of like you go into a restaurant and they go, "I'm making X," and your cost of goods is out of line. So, I don't know if anyone's ever shown you the business reference guide, but there's a book published by the Business Brokerage Press by all the brokers in the country. We collate data, and inside that book, it has these KPIs. Yeah. So, your broker should know this stuff before they ever visit you. Some of us, you do enough, and you tell me you've got 100 pools and you're making $90,000. I'm gonna go, "There's no freaking way. There's no way. Just isn't gonna happen," right? Unless you're doing spas or something, right? So there's these valuation through exception, which is similar to financial management through exception. You're trying to find the anomaly in the financials or in the story to figure out what it's doing. And if you watch, Peter does this on M&A deals. He'll look at the financials. He goes to the balance sheet and he likens it to like a prostate exam. And he's like, the balance sheet tells everything to Peter. To me, I don't really look at the balance sheet. I want to hear the story. And I'll look at the balance sheet after I hear the story. But generally, like my dad, when he was a doctor, he used to be able to just diagnose people just by talking to them. And then I'll go, "Yeah, this is what I think, but I got to see the numbers to kind of lock in." And industries have norms too, and that's one of the challenges. Is the guys go to the pool store, or they're hanging out at the bar, they talk to their buddy at the gas station, and they lie to each other, and they'll hear multiples, right? And they'll confuse multiples of revenue versus multiples of cash flow, and they'll watch Shark Tank and go, "Well, he got a 5 multiple." I mean, I stopped at a real estate broker yesterday to get a referral for an attorney, and he goes, "Hey, I have a property management company." I'm making around 400. I said, well, you're making 400. Is there a manager? So it's closer to 5. He goes, yeah. I go, yeah, it's about 2.5 multiple. That's it. I'm like, okay, you've obviously heard something, right?
Yeah.
Let me show you then I send them the comps to show. I'm like, oh, this is reality. So sometimes it's that grounding in reality until they're ready to sell. Conversely, sometimes people, and that's when you go out on the marketplace, you'll see businesses are grossly overpriced. That's because brokers will take the engagement and then do what we call sweating you into the box and bring you down to the number.
Yeah.
That's really why businesses take so damn long. Everybody knows what things sell for. It's just the sellers and the buyers live in la la land, or they're selling based upon what they need. And then the brokers roll the dice on whether it'll get there. The trick is, do you really want to sell? And if you really want to sell, then here's what's really going to happen. And then price it right, and we'll negotiate up for the best price and terms after that. The theory of creating competition to drive the number up.
Now you've done 326. Tomorrow will be 327.
Yeah.
327 deals. You've seen a lot of deals gone wild.
Mhm.
You said there's a few things that kill a deal, lawyers and landlords. Kind of like what besides that, right? Like we can't use that because you already said that. But besides that, what are some things, some signs for deals about to gone wild? Because you have some interesting stories.
I did say lawyers and landlords, and that was because of something I told you earlier. And I don't mean that to be a bad thing. Landlords sometimes have unrealistic expectations, or they take the transaction as an opportunity to leverage. There are types of landlords that I look for to give me a heads up. Like, I hate doctor landlords. Now, I'm the son and the nephew of a physician.
Yeah.
And I can say this is, it's inside the family. Doctors make horrible business people. Oftentimes, you have to engage in legalese or bring in counsel, and then lawyers hate doctors, doctors hate lawyers. So so you're managing that emotion. Sometimes people who own individual buildings or corporate landlords, like a Publix, can be a hard landlord to deal with, just because of the monotony and the size of the organization to navigate to get favorable terms put in place. So not all landlords are bad. It's just certain types, based upon their agenda, because they're a third leg of the stool. And you've got to kind of, buyer and seller can do everything right, and the landlord can go, yeah, I'm going to raise the rent $1,000 and kill the deal, right? So on the lawyer front, look, I got dozens of lawyers who I've worked with who are great, and they're on a list. So when you come to me as a buyer and a seller, I'm like, I don't care who you pick. If there's 12 or 13 you can pick from that know what they're doing. You pick someone who's not done business transactions, it can get expensive, it can get choppy. If they don't have the bandwidth to handle business transactions. So, I sometimes look at a lawyer and someone tells me they have an attorney. I go, what's the name? I look them up. And if they're practicing everything, they're a Swiss Army knife attorney, we got problems, because, business law, it's like going to a brain surgeon for, orthopedic issues, or a heart surgeon for prostate surgery. Yes, everybody went to med school. Everybody did a rotation. But if you don't practice in a field of study,
yeah,
you can screw the transaction up, or you don't know what can go wrong. I mean, the one I was sharing with you earlier, 2 lawyers, both in real estate, who have never done a business deal, and both buyer and seller chose attorneys outside the scope. And we're all the way to tomorrow is supposed to be 328.
yeah.
And I'm calling them. Are you guys with the closer? Are you talking to the bank? Yeah, everything's good to go. And then we find out the buyer's attorney didn't make sure that the closing, the fund's been approved, because they wouldn't let me talk to the bank either. As a broker, I'm not allowed to talk to the bank unless I have explicit permission. That's a whole nother show, by the way. The dysfunction of the SBA. So, the control, and I heard an attorney say, what I'm real good at is being a bird dog. I don't pull the trigger. I don't target the bird, but I run it down and I remove things from going wrong when you let me run.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you don't trust me and you put me on a leash, there ain't gonna be much I can do. I can't chase the duck if you don't let me in the water. So you've got to let the brokers do their job and know what the brokers' jobs are. Know what they can do and what they can't do. And the brokers need to know what they can do and can't do, because I don't practice law. But I know enough about what the lawyers should be doing. Same thing for the CPAs. They need to stay in their lane as well. So those three professionals need to work together to get deals done. And, again, not being leveraged to get, desperate to get a deal. That's where the barriers start happening. The lawyers assume the brokers are all desperate.
So
the
brokers, CPA, and attorney, those are the three legs of the stool primarily needed to make a deal work well.
Yeah, you got to have good ones.
Yeah. And if one of them is not quite there, if they don't specialize, they specialize maybe in real estate and they're trying to do this deal, it could get choppy. What are some, you mentioned the roles and responsibilities of a business broker, right? You've done a lot of deals, you high volume, you've seen a lot. What makes a good broker? Let's just say I just had a big exit and I'm like, hey, I'd like to help, I want to be a business broker. Second career, actually for me, it'd be like career number 136. But, I want to do another career as a full-time business broker with you. And you're coaching me on what makes a good broker. How would you guide me?
So
my coach?
we've had three or four brokers start this year. And one of the things I've told all of them was your reputation needs to be unimpeachable. I said, just from a sales standpoint, if you're going to be selling in a busy marketplace, in a competitive marketplace, people don't have to like you. There's a theory you got to like salespeople. There are plenty of people in Orlando who don't like me, but there aren't anybody who question my integrity. So, to me, it's always been people are dealing with something really serious, and they want honesty and integrity on the buy side and the sell side. The greatest challenge for a buyer is they're scared.
Yeah.
It's not the numbers. It's not the math. It's not. That's very two-dimensional. X plus Y equals Z. Pulling the trigger and trusting this is the right thing with their life savings or moving the family to America or, second career transitioning, enrolling their 401k, they got to trust their advisors. And if you have one mark can ruin you and ruin a firm. So you got to have integrity, and you'll lose some as a broker. Sometimes you'll lose to somebody who's not honest. Not in the long run, though. In the long run, bad deals go bad. So do a good deal, treat your people with respect, tell them when if you honestly think they shouldn't close. I mean, there have been several occasions where I've actually called people up and said, don't do this.
Really? What would make you do that? You and I are doing a deal together. You're coaching me, mentoring me. We're driving around, and you're like, man, I got to call so-and-so business. And you're like, they shouldn't close. And I'm like, what? Why?
I had a guy, I've had several who just were not understanding the business. They were in it for the wrong reasons. They were smarter than everybody in the room. Small business in particular is semi-nuanced, particularly in hospitality. Buyers want to stare at balance sheets and financials. Let's go back to Tommy Boy, right? The contract or the guarantee. Yeah. They want to stare at that balance sheet. I remember doing a pizza parlor, and guy was walking in. He was staring at the furniture and the oven and the equipment and looking at the balance sheet and the financials. And on the wall, this is on a Saturday morning, and on the wall were full pizza boxes, the length of the building stacked to the ceiling. Literally 200 of them. And he's staring at the floor and he's going, I'm going to clean this place up and redo the interior. And I stopped him and I said, I'll call him Bob. I said, Bob, take this for what it's worth, but the interior is irrelevant. He's like, it looks terrible. I'm like, it's not a sit-down restaurant. It's a freaking takeout restaurant. And you need to count the pizza boxes. He's like, why? I said, they're $18 a piece. Before sausage and pizza, before sausage and pepperoni and freaking vegetables, the average, I hand in the menu, I go, this business does takeout. Mm-hmm. It's not a sit down. It's the middle of downtown. I'm like, this ain't a sit down restaurant for drunks. This is takeout after drinking. And this is how you make money. It's the pizza box. So that goes to like your pool question. There are things you walk into a restaurant, and when somebody doesn't notice that type of subtlety, I kind of go, you're going to screw this pooch. Or, hey, I'm going to just hire people and I'm white collar and I'm never going to work. Yeah. Small business, you got to step in sometimes.
Yeah. How often does that work?
I had a guy who came from Europe, wanted to buy a business, and the seller called me up. I'll never forget it. It was Christmas Eve. We were closing on the 28th. And the seller called me up and said, he didn't feel like these guys had it. It was property management, it's vacation rentals. So he's like, what do I do? I said, well, you're in contract. You can't tell him not to close, but send him a letter or send him an email telling him not to close. I wrote a registered letter to the buyer telling him, I don't think you're capable of running this business. He closed. They always do. He turned around and wanted to sue everybody when he screwed it up. And out came the registered letter. And I said, hey, and when his lawyer called me, I said, just give me your fax number. I'm going to send you something. And it went away. Because you could tell certain people are suited for certain things.
Yeah.
You called it earlier. Ego's the issue.
Ego is the issue. Yeah. Ryan Holiday wrote a really cool book called Ego is the Enemy. Great book. And it talks about, how ego gets in the way of deals, and it kills deals, it kills businesses, it kills relationships. Ego really is a poison, but we all keep feeding the beast.
Ego and principle. Like, you ever hear that one where they're like, it's about the principle. Principles are expensive. No one lies, cheats, or steals, or tolerate those who do. That's kind of the ethos of the Army officer. But I'm not fighting over $5,000. That's not worth my time or headache. And if you're going to be painful, if you're not going to listen, then kind of move on. Yeah. I mean, because sometimes I'm not the fit. You kind of alluded to it. Not every broker is the right fit for people.
Yeah.
If you interview 3 brokers and you go, I just don't like Mike, he's too firm. Cool. That's cool. That's okay. Pick someone you're comfortable with no matter what. And I'll routinely refer people to other firms. Just say, hey, you want someone who's going to really hold your hand a lot more? That's that guy, not me. And that doesn't make me bad or them bad. It's just, there's no judgment. Yeah.
So you mentioned Tommy Boy, great movie about sales, really great. Name another movie or show that you watch that you're like, there's a lot of business.
Mad Men.
Okay.
Don Draper.
Give us a lesson you've learned from the movie or from the show Mad Men with Don Draper.
There's a scene where you go on YouTube and it's Don Draper's best sales pitch. And I believe it's on, remember the old carousel slideshows?
Yeah.
And Draper stands there and goes through Life's a Carousel, and he has his own family photos in there. And I've watched that and tried to show it to people over and over again. You shouldn't ask me about movie analogies because I'll go on for days. Yeah. But where he's walking through the carousel of life, and linking personal to a product and people's dreams, there's some genius in that. And I think there's some genius in that with business. I've seen people look over perfectly good businesses because of ego or perception. You come from the corporate world where you've always worn a suit and you look over businesses because it's dirty. I'll tell you a story. I had a lawn service while I was still a business broker. I bought a lawn service with a guy, and we got pretty big. And my father was visiting, and he was blind at the time, and he was sitting through our end of year financial meeting and going through the numbers. And he came out to the car and he said, "Did I hear those numbers right?" And I went, "Which ones are you referring to?" And he rattled off the profit numbers. I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Why did I send you to college?" I said, "Dad, I learned that stuff. I learned that people make a lot of money in businesses that other people don't want to do."
Yeah.
And I learned that carrying golf bags as a kid at a country club, because the plumbers were the ones who were off all the time. It wasn't the doctors. The doctors were working all the time because they got paid by the piece. The plumbers, Stu Posta and Larry Perot, sitting at the bar every Tuesday and Wednesday and Saturday and Sunday. The doctors, maybe a Wednesday afternoon and a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
But the point being that, you asked about the movie thing. It's you have to understand what motivates people. So when guys are coming out of the corporate world, they're adjusting from that ego and what they thought their life would be like. And their primary concern most of the time is feeding their family. Yeah. And reconciling, hey, I got to do this business that I never saw myself doing. And that's an adjustment for a lot of people.
I interviewed a retired colonel. It was a colonel. And when he got out of the service, he bought a franchise for vinyl and leather repair. And he did a really cool thing. He goes, because I wanted to learn, so I bought this this business to do this. So that was that's anti-ego, right? Where it's like he's building something because he wants to learn. It's the businesses that nobody wants to do that I think a lot of people would steer away from because of prestige. When someone's like, hey, what do you do? I'm a doctor. I'm an attorney. I'm an investor. What do you do? Yeah. I'm in construction, right? Or I sweep streets or whatever. Yeah. Why? So do you think that, and I know the answer, but this is, I want to hear your thoughts on this, is like, how does that hinder people in their career or in their professional life? Or how have you overcome that in yours?
Well, I went through it. Bottoming out and transitioning into brokerage, where you have to eat what you kill to feed your family. And then, look, my generation was raised, I think that the current generation coming up is told, go to college, get your degree. And no one looks at the math, right? I mean, you're going to spend $200,000 to get a degree, right? And be debt up to your 45, and you're going to make 50 grand. You will never climb out of that hole, ever. The math just doesn't work. And I have brothers with all my brothers have master's degrees except for the one in construction, right? And multiple degrees. And they've been sold on the idea that, not sold, but it was the right thing to do for certain types of professions, but they're certainly not the wealthiest people. And there are exceptions to that, but more often that, and I know people come out of, we've got a lady coming into the brokerage business now, highly successful. And I'm rattling stuff off about how to set up her business and, what corporate structure. And she's like, I don't know any of this. I'm like, well, you got an MBA. She's like, they don't teach us this. They don't teach lawyers how to practice law either, by the way. They teach you the law. They don't teach you how to actually function. So there's another topic, another podcast. Education's broke. But we would be wise to go back to a little bit more practical. But the colonel, right?
Yeah.
Good officer, you make colonel, you're pretty bright, right? Probably not a politician, right? You got capped out, you couldn't be a general. But you don't get there without having to actually do stuff. Like actually, it's one thing, I've given this analogy when I've talked to Transworld. I go, look, I can tell you to go take a hill, but if you don't know how to clear your weapon and load it, theory and tactics are totally different. You have to know actually how to do. And we see people, their egos get in the way. But the funny thing is, the math eventually forces you to pull the trigger. Now, sometimes you pull the trigger on something you shouldn't do because of the ego, but at some point you execute. And that they usually go to the franchises, because the franchises give some level of comfort and process, right? And corporate types, you can always pick a franchise buyer out of the book, right? Because they like the established process and the resources. It's very rigid. Most franchise buyers would never buy another franchise because they've already learned the stuff they didn't know that provided them comfort. And that's not wrong or right. That's just, it is what it is, right? You get, what's that 6% you're kicking to the mothership worth, right? Now, as a Transworld franchise system, we're always adding value. We're learning some new stuff. There's tons of stuff we're doing to add value. So take what I say with a parcel of salt. But I think we're on a cusp of people returning to entrepreneurship, because it's going to be the way we have to make a living. And they're just, we're outsourcing. Now we're in a global economy. The AI is going to eliminate a lot of middle management. Like, hey, I started to rub my hands when Corona hit, because there was like this whack right in the middle of like middle managers making 150 grand. They just got pushed out. And I have friends who are my age, and I'm talking to them. I'm going, you need to plan, because that it's not if, it's when. And you still got kids pending college. You better have a contingency plan.
Yeah.
They don't usually listen, but I sleep well at night knowing that I told them, hey, this is an option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the kind of deals that you like in geographic, like where you mentioned the deals you like, right? You're like, hey man, if it has a good story, if it's in, you like service-based businesses, pools, you said you'll touch anything, which I think is really cool. What geographic areas are you, typically focused on?
So I've done 2 deals in Utah. I've done deals in Maryland. I've done deals in Rhode Island, because that's where I went to college, and people call me and go, hey, can you handle it? And I'm like, this is before we had our franchise system. So I'll go just about anywhere if it makes sense and I can service the client. If I can't service the client, then I'm gonna hand it off. I'm industry agnostic. Like the longer I've got into it, the more I've discovered there isn't a hell of a lot of, industry specifics that I can't learn pretty quickly. I've done distribution, I've done trucking, I'm not a big fan of bars. I can tell you that right off the bat. I don't like the model. I just don't. It's got fixed overhead. Right. And then there's just a whole lot of theft in it. It's just, I tell people, watch Bar Rescue, and that's everything that could go wrong. So I now live in the middle of the state. So my wife took a job out in Lakeland, which is west of Orlando, about 40 minutes, and 30 minutes outside of Tampa. I was reading an article the other day that you're going to see the Metroplex. We're going to have a true Metroplex of like an Orlampa, where they're going to just merge. And I'm sitting, yeah, Orlampa. If you drive across I-4, there's a sign that says, welcome to the future of Orlampa. It's not meant in goodwill, but there's some urban sprawl pushing this way. It's a huge distribution hub, always has been. And there's a lot of manufacturing and trades here. So a lot of blue collar stuff, trucking and, phosphate mines, and just stuff that we've never dealt with before that I'm kind of excited to get involved in. But I'll do anything now. I don't need to know everything about your business. I need to know how to sell it. You will teach me, and I'll figure it out pretty damn quick. Really quick, frankly, what it's doing. Because a widget's a widget. Distribution's distribution. I remember when I was at Pepsi and I tried to jump into the beer business, those guys got all evangelical, like, you don't understand beer. I'm like, it's freaking beverages. It's a widget. What's the price point? What's the gross margin? What are the regulations on selling? Sometimes industries kind of create these barriers for themselves. And the reality is, the numbers are the numbers are the numbers. I'll pull the comps, do the research. You're going to tell me everything else I need to know. And I'll get smarter on every interaction with a client and every buyer. So I'm going to learn more as we go. And by the time we close, I'm pretty much on it. So.
What motivates you? Like what keeps you driving? You've been doing this 15 years. Your wife's an executive. Like you could walk away from certain deals. Like what keeps you going? What keeps you pushing? What to break company records and to,
the records don't, the records are irrelevant. They just kind of happened. It was always the consistency of cash flows. I just run I run a practice. I consider my business a business. So the way I was trained was, never have 20% of my revenue tied into things. I looked at the analysis of when I got into the business, I looked at the numbers that I could gather, and I wanted to hedge risk. Like, more customers is better than less. When the annuity factor kind of came to bear and I started to recycle, I went, oh crap, I can cut down my ad spend, right? There's just some nuances that came to pass. So what keeps me going? I just don't like being second. I just don't like it. But I also like being a dad, and I built my business in a way that I can be present for my family. I cared for my dad for the last 8 years. He passed away last October, 2 days, and his anniversary was the 19th. And that was a blessing to be able to take care of my father for the remainder of his life. And I could not have done that in any other business. So I am grateful for Andy's support and this business that, look, I did not know the business I was building, which allowed me to be the guy who takes his kids to school, brings his kids home from school, attends their soccer games, and was able to care for his parents. That wasn't intentional. It happened though. So I kind of said, you know what? I'm kind of happy with this way we run this business. And I still like doing bigger things. Like the more I interact with Peter, the more I'm learning that I'll be able to pivot up and do some of those larger transactions, because he's a little longer in the tooth than I am. And I've got to download a bunch of that data into my head, because I watch how he does things, and can I do that the way he does? Because there's some genius in it. And conversely, I hope he watches. He said to me one day, "Because you do stuff I can't do." So there's like a mutual respect there. But Treve, have you met Treve?
No, not yet.
Our VP of sales. He's always like, "You're not gonna be able to sustain this." So that's just like, well, screw you.
I'll show you.
I am. And he said that to me like 2 years ago. And I went, okay. And I knocked out 30 just to piss him off. And then the recession hit, I did 24. I'm like, or the COVID hit, right? So I'm like, okay, is it unsustainable? And we're still testing the thesis of the sustainability. And we're still learning. This is still a nuanced business enough that what technology can I deploy? How do I enter new markets? Like entering Lakeland into Tampa, it's like starting over again. Because I don't have, I'm still having to shift right to Orlando, and I'm still trying to build Tampa in this market. And that, is a challenge enough to keep me moving.
Yeah. It sounds like you like a challenge though. You like a good fight.
I do. I don't like getting in fights. I like the challenge, but I don't, I bounced at one time in my life, and I learned that it's better to walk away.
Yeah.
I'm not, I give off that appearance sometimes, and Andy's accused me of being a little too rough, but if you've ever been in a bar fight, you learn that punching people hurts. So it's better just get them outside the door. My boss back then, Louis DeContenza, told me, "I don't want you fighting in the bar, just get them out of the bar." And that was, hey, get the deal done. That's what matters. It's the whole, I'm not fighting over $5,000.
Yeah, it's not worth it, man.
And if you think you won, cool, you won. Did I get paid? Thumbs up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as you're buying and selling businesses and you're doing a bunch of, deals and transactions, like what kind of deals that come across the plate, like really jazz you up? Like you're like, man, I'm pumped about this.
Man, I really enjoyed some of these bigger ones because I'm getting to learn stuff. The little ones, I enjoy when some other broker hands it off to me because they couldn't do it. And I'm like, boy, you screwed that up. I had one this year that two brokers I really respect. They just looked at the financials and went, I can't figure this out. But they just hadn't done enough in the industry to know where the money was. And I sold it in 30 days. And I sent them a check. He's like, what? I'm like, but they knew that I knew the industry. It was property management, right? So they're like, look, I can't figure it out on the surface. Give it to Shea. And he called me up because you'll figure this out and sell it and we'll be done. So that's always fun. And I see that sometimes where brokers turn deals down. I love when I get a call from someone. I get two types of calls. They'll say, I may be too small for you. I'm like, no, you're not. Everybody deserves good representation, and every business owner needs to exit. or everybody else turned me down. Can you take a look at it? And I like getting those done for people because they're so eternally grateful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you focus on character and integrity. Those are some of the core, components that, I've heard you mention a few times. And you love deals, right? You have some character traits that you say these are really important, and you love deals. What is something that will make you, as you're talking with a potential buyer or seller or something like that, what are some red flags that you will walk away from a deal before, get involved? What are some things that you look for?
I walked from someone 2 weeks ago. He made a racial comment. Just walked, said, I can't do this. The financial stuff, the mistakes people make on their financials, that doesn't bother me from an ethics standpoint. I'm not going to, I think they're accountants or they get bad advice throughout their life. That stuff doesn't bother me. But, if a seller or a buyer wants to do something unethical in a transaction, I'm going to get roped into it. So I'll just walk. And I can't go into what those things could be. It could run from, wire fraud to, just your spite. The longer you do deals, the more your spider senses. We were going through a sales meeting yesterday and someone made a comment about somebody and you could hear me. Well, I was there. I was like, walk, walk, walk. And it was how a guy was doing a transaction, stock sale, problems going to the end. I won't be able to close. Let's close anyways to get control over bank. And you do this long enough, you know how people try and do things. But people are just bad people. I don't want to work with them because, by the way, they're not going to close, and it's just going to blow up in your face, and you're going to end up dealing with it afterwards, and it's not worth the time.
How many deals do you want to hit before you retire?
I was thinking about that. I think it will be close to 1,000.
What about cresting 1,000? How about 1,001?
I think I'll be good at 1,000. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done at 1,000. So let's see. If I do another 700, I'll be in my 70s, right? I got to do the math on that.
Okay. So
what I'll do is hopefully my children will have their license by then, and I can start like spreading my little minions out and roll it up under my bucket.
There you go. Hey, Mike, for people out there who have a business, they want you to take a look at it. They want to deal with someone who's going to be real with them. They want to, they don't want to have their ears tickled. They want to sell a business. They're motivated and they go, we need some help. We need a straight shooter. Where can people connect with you? Thank you for being on the show, and then do a deal with you.
The website's www.yourfloridabusinessbroker.com. I am on all the social media handles, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok. You can find me there. The best way to get me is to text me, 321-287-0349, and I will answer.
Very cool.
Quickly.
Yeah, because this guy likes deals, if you haven't noticed. Yeah. So cool. Mike, thanks for being on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, reach out to our guests. Say thanks for being on the show. Connect with them, follow what they're doing, find a way to do a deal with them. And if you're working on a deal, want to talk about it on the Deal Scout, head on over to thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form, maybe get you on the show next. Till then, talk to you all on the next episode. See you, everybody.